In 1985, George A. Romero brought the dead underground, and he didn't hold back. There was no hope, no escape plan, just isolation, decay, and collapse. It wasn't the sequel fans expected, but what Romero delivered may be his most uncompromising vision of all. George Romero's Day of the Dead was never meant to be an easy viewing. It's bleak, angry, and relentlessly claustrophobic. But behind the gore and shouting matches is a meditation on humanity, what we lose and what we hold on to when the end finally arrives. The story of Day of the Dead begins with ambition. After Dawn of the Dead became an international success, George A. Romero had a vision for a much larger, more epic third chapter. His original script, often referred to as the Gone with the Wind of zombie films, imagined a much larger, military-controlled society deep underground. The film was set to open with a full-blown action sequence, as soldiers rounded up zombies in a fortified city. The dead weren't just threats. They were being trained for labor, conditioned by scientists, and seen as the first step towards reclaiming the world above. But there was one problem: money. The United Film Distribution agreed to fund the movie only if Romero delivered an R-rated film. But Romero refused to compromise on the gore. He wanted to go all in. So instead of the $7 million budget that he hoped for, he got about $3.5 million and had to rewrite the entire script from scratch. Filming took place in a real limestone mine beneath Wampum, Pennsylvania. The location was massive, over 2,500 acres of tunnels, and it gave the film its unforgettable underground atmosphere. But it was hell to shoot in. The mine contained a constant 50-degree temperature with 100% humidity. Equipment corroded, camera lenses fogged up, and every night the crew had to remove their gear because the mine owners turned off the generators. Despite the conditions, Romero brought together many of the same collaborators from Dawn, including producer Richard P. Rubinstein and special effects legend Tom Savini. Savini had grown as an artist since Dawn, and this time he had more freedom and more tools to unleash the most realistic and brutal zombie carnage of his career. Savini's team, assisted by young makeup artists like Greg Nicotero, Howard Berger, and Everett Burrow, pushed practical gore to new heights. The zombies in Day were more detailed than ever before. Rotted skin, exposed bone, snarling mouths, and it was all done with foam latex, mortician's wax, and hand-painted blood effects. To make the gore feel more real, they used animal organs, mostly pig intestines and sheep guts stored in refrigerators that were often unreliable. In one famous incident, the fridge broke, and the cast and crew were forced to work with rotting entrails during a key death scene. According to Greg Nicotero, the smell was so bad that the crew members vomited off camera. Savini also created the animatronic version of Torres. It took hours of prep for only a few seconds of screen time. But nothing topped the death of Captain Rhodes. The now iconic choke on him sequence used a lifelike dummy with real meat and blood packs. The result? A death scene that is still celebrated as one of horror's most visceral send-offs. Romero once again turned to John Harrison for the film's score, who had previously worked on Creepshow. This time, Harrison created a moody, synth-driven soundtrack that leaned heavily into atmosphere. Unlike the chaotic tone in Dawn, Day's music is eerie, minimal, and deeply emotional. It blends isolation with melancholy, most notably in scenes like Sarah's breakdown, where Harrison's music adds a haunting beauty to the despair. Even Bub gets his own motifs, subtly reinforcing the film's themes of memory, humanity, and loss. Day of the Dead doesn't have a large ensemble, but every character carries weight. Romero strips the cast down to a handful of survivors, each representing a different response to the end of the world. Laurie Cardille plays Sarah, the film's emotional anchor. She's the last scientist still trying to find meaning amid collapse. Strong, rational, and quietly haunted, she's not the kind of final girl horror usually offers, but something more grounded. Her performance is raw, especially in her breakdown scene with John. She doesn't scream through the film, she endures it. Her father, Bill Cardille, also known as Chilly Billy, was a good friend of George Romero and would appear in Night of the Living Dead and also in Day of the Dead as an extra. Richard Liberty plays Dr. Logan, also known as Frankenstein. Charismatic, obsessive, and ethically questionable, Logan is one of Romero's most layered characters. He believes science is the only way forward, but hides the fact that he's experimenting with dismembered soldiers. His mental state deteriorates quickly, and by the time Rhodes executes him, Logan has become both brilliant and broken. John Amplas, who also played the lead in Martin, plays Fisher, a soft-spoken and rational assistant to Logan. Fisher represents the middle ground, neither as idealistic as Sarah, nor as unhinged as Logan. In many ways, he's the conscience of the scientific group. Joseph Pilato is Captain Rhodes, the newly self-appointed leader of the military unit after the previous commander's death. Pilato plays him with explosive volatility, a man who mistakes fear for strength. He doesn't just crack under the pressure, he shatters, relying on threats and violence to maintain power. It's not just a great horror villain performance, it's a masterclass in unchecked ego during collapse. Joe Pilato originally auditioned for Dawn of the Dead and had a small role in that film as a police officer. Romero remembered his energy and rewrote Rhodes to better suit his acting style. Pilato said he basically played the character at 11 for every scene. Gary Howard Clark and Ralph Romero are Steele and Rickles, Rhodes' brutal enforcers. Loud, aggressive, and vulgar, they represent the toxic militarism that Romero critiques. Whether mocking Bub or intimidating civilians, they act first and think later. But behind their tough guy routine is fear, and ultimately, it gets them killed. Anthony DeLeo Jr. plays Miguel Salazar, a young soldier unraveling from trauma. Emotionally fragile and physically deteriorating, Miguel's fear and anxiety makes him unpredictable. His breakdown is gradual but devastating. Philip G. Kellum as Private Miller and Greg Nicotero as Johnson both have limited screen time, but they serve as early indicators on how fractured the military group has become. They both died during a failed attempt to corral the zombies. Tasso Stavrakis as Torres rounds out the squad. Torres ultimately meets his end when the base is overran by the undead. Terry Alexander plays John, the philosophical helicopter pilot. John isn't interested in control, he just wants peace. He provides the heart of the film's message, challenging Sarah to abandon the cold logic of science and escape with him and McDermott. His laid-back demeanor masks real insight, and his refusal to pick sides is what keeps him alive. Jarlath Conroy is McDermott, the quiet, weary radio operator. He's often seen drinking, cracking dry jokes, but he's far more observant than anyone gives him credit for. He recognizes how fragile their situation is, but remains loyal to John and Sarah. In the end, he's not a hero or a leader. He's a realist, and sometimes that's what survival requires. And finally, Howard Sherman as Bub, the film's breakout star. Bub is a zombie, but he's more than that. He remembers music, he salutes, and he shows affection. Sherman studied chimp behavior to bring a sense of emotional truth to the role. And it works. Bub is Romero's most complex undead character, a symbol of potential, empathy, and what little hope might still remain. Day of the Dead opens with a nightmare. Sarah jolts awake in a helicopter as they fly over a dead city. The streets are empty until the undead start to pour out. She's not dreaming of death, she is surrounded by it. Sarah and Miguel are searching for survivors, any sign of humanity. They don't find any, just more reminders that the world above is gone. They return to an underground military facility where tensions between the soldiers and scientists have reached a boiling point. The project is falling apart, supplies are low, morale is worse, and the chain of command fractured. Rhodes assumes command after the previous commander's death. He's not interested in research or diplomacy. He wants results and obedience. Meanwhile, Sarah is barely holding things together. Miguel, her partner, is on the verge of a nervous breakdown. McDermott and John, the civilian tech crew, are staying quiet, watching the power struggle unfold. This act is pure tension. There are no big action scenes, just dread. Romero builds pressure through dialogue, silence, and close-ups. Every character is boxed in, literally and emotionally. Even the location reinforces the theme. A bunker meant for safety now feels like a tomb. Romero isn't just setting up a zombie movie. He is setting up a slow-motion mutiny. The scientists continue their experiment with the undead. Dr. Logan, nicknamed Frankenstein, believes that the dead can be trained. One subject, Bub, shows signs of memory and emotion. He listens to music, salutes, and even recognizes a razor and a phone. To Logan, this is hope. To Rhodes, it's insanity. One of the most beautiful and heartbreaking moments comes shortly before the chaos. Sarah breaks down in John's quarters, crying for the first time. The music swells, and for a moment, the apocalypse feels deeply, painfully human. The tensions erupt when it's revealed that Logan has been feeding the dead soldiers to Bub and the other test subjects. Rhodes is furious. He sees it as betrayal, maybe even treason. He executes Logan in cold blood. Rhodes and Logan mirror each other. Both are desperate to hold on to control. Rhodes lashes out with violence. Logan retreats into obsession. They represent different forms of madness, and neither survives it. Miguel, now mentally shattered, allows the zombies into the base. It's an act of desperation or vengeance, and the base begins to fall. This is a turning point, not just in the plot, but in the tone. The film goes from a psychological drama to survival horror. As the zombies flood the compound, Rhodes' authority crumbles, and his men are picked off one by the undead. As Rhodes tries to run, Bub is waiting. He remembers, and he follows. Bub just doesn't shoot Rhodes. He stalks him, he salutes, and then lets him die in one of the most brutal, poetic deaths in horror history. Meanwhile, John, Sarah, and McDermott escape through a back tunnel. They board a helicopter, finally free. The film ends not in chaos, but in peace. A beach, the sun, birds. Romero ends Day of the Dead with a haunting duality. The world is gone. The dead have won, but there's still room for peace, for escape, for life. This is Romero's bleakest film, but also his most honest. It's not about zombies. It's about people and what they become when everything falls apart. Some lose control, some lose hope, but a few hold on. When Day of the Dead hit theaters on July 19th, 1985, audiences didn't know quite what to make of it. Romero had set a high bar with Night and Dawn. Critics expected more of the same, a big crowd-pleasing sequel packed with social commentary and explosive zombie action. Instead, they got a bleak, talk-heavy chamber piece filled with tension, decay, and existential dread. The initial reviews were mixed. Critics praised the makeup effects and Savini's gore, but many found the film to be too slow, too cynical, and even hopeless. It didn't perform well at the box office either, earning just $5 million domestically, well below expectations. But time changes everything. Over the years, Day of the Dead built a cult following. Horror fans began to see what was really there, not a letdown, but a brutal masterpiece about collapse of structure, the dangers of power, and the last flickers of humanity in an inhuman world. The performances, especially Laurie Cardille, Joseph Pilato, and Howard Sherman, earned new respect. Pilato's portrayal of Rhodes is now considered one of the genre's most memorable villains. Sherman's Bub became a symbol of Romero's belief that even in death, there might be something left. In the effects world, Day became legend. It marked the rise of future icons like Greg Nicotero and Howard Berger, young makeup artists who would go on to shape the genre in films, TV, and shows like The Walking Dead. Romero himself considered Day of the Dead as his personal favorite of the original trilogy. He saw it as his most honest, the most ambitious, and the most uncompromised of the three. And in hindsight, it's easy to see why. Day of the Dead isn't about saving the world, it's about surviving it, about facing the worst in people and trying not to become it. It's raw, it's unflinching, and it never offers easy answers. 4 decades later, Day of the Dead still hits hard, and in many ways, it feels more relevant than ever. With Day of the Dead, Romero just didn't end a trilogy. He closed the book on one of the most influential runs in horror history. From the farmhouse in Night, to the mall in Dawn, to the underground bunker in Day, these films chart the fall of society, from panic to consumerism to collapse. Romero gave us more than zombies. He gave us a mirror.